Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 27 of my 2021 reads. This week I finished a number of short things, and I DNF'd quite a few things as well. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I read The Return of the Sorceress by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This is her newest release. It is a sword and sorcery fantasy novella, and it is so much fun. I really enjoyed this. I actually am going to have a standalone review for this up later this week if you're interested. But basically, this is a novella set in a Mesoamerican inspired fantasy world, and we follow Yalshi, who is a very powerful sorceress. She is the supreme mistress, in fact, of the Guild of Sorcerers until she is betrayed and deposed, and now she is fighting for her life, trying to escape the people trying to kill her, and also trying to regain her power and position, perhaps through some not so great magic. So this story is just so cool. It's got all of these really neat kind of mythological creatures and things like different types of blood magic. It is filled with this journey of this woman. It's very centered around her journey, and it's got a lot of good questions about power and ambition. She's kind of an unlikable character, and I really liked her for that. So I thoroughly enjoyed this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I will have a review up later this week. Next, I finished Spy X Family Volume 2 by Tatsuya Endo, translated from Japanese by Casey Lowe. This is the second book in the Spy X Family manga series, and I have been waiting for this. I've had a hold on it at my library, but it's a very popular series, and for good reason. This is so much fun. I enjoyed the second volume as much as I enjoyed the first one. It is basically set in this kind of alternate history-ish / fictional version of Cold War Germany, and we follow a spy, Twilight, who is tasked with infiltrating this very elite private school. And in order to do this, he has to get kind of a child and a wife. And the child that he picks up from an orphanage happens to be a telepath, and the wife that he kind of gets for fake marriage happens to be an assassin. And they don't know these things about each other, although the telepath daughter does. And this story is just so ridiculous. It is absurd. It is so fun. I really am reminded of how much I like manga when I read this story. It makes me laugh. I love the artwork, and it's got this real sense of heart, because a lot of what the story is talking about is these 3 people in this fake family. None of them really know how to be in a family, and so it's all about them learning to value each other as well as dealing with all of the spy antics. So definitely adored this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I can't wait to continue. Next, I read a picture book, Oona, by Kelly DiPucchio, illustrated by Raissa Figueroa. Last week I had read a different picture book that Raissa Figueroa had illustrated, We Wait for the Sun, and I loved the illustrations so much that I went and looked to see if my library had anything else by her, and they had this one, and this was even more beautifully illustrated. This story is about a little mermaid and her companion otter, and the little mermaid is very adventurous, and she likes to go find things, lots of treasures, and is very ingenious in trying to figure out how to get to things. And this is about her coming across a treasure that it's very hard to get to and trying to figure out how to overcome the obstacles that she comes across. It is just really gorgeous. I loved the storyline. I loved the artwork. It was just great. I gave this picture book 5 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I finished this week was How I Survived 4 Nights on the Ice by Serapio Ittusardjuat, illustrated by Matthew K. Hoddy. So this is a sort of non-fiction mini memoir of an incident that Ittusardjuat experienced. He is Inuit and lives in that kind of very northern province of Canada, Nunavut, and he got stranded on the ice by himself for 4 days. And so this is the story of how he survived that using traditional methods. The artwork in this isn't so much my style. It kind of gives you a good idea of the bleakness, the desolation of the ice, but it just wasn't so much my style. The story itself is interesting because that is kind of a survivalist story. Although again, it's a very narrow scope. I think it was really cool because it is focusing on these traditional skills of the Inuit though. So I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now moving on to my DNFs, and I actually had 3 DNFs this week. So the first was Sharks in the Time of Saviors by Kawai Strong Washburn. This is a story that I'd heard about from a number of different people and I was interested in. It is sort of a magical realism story of like a family in Hawaii and some things that happened to them. So sort of a family drama. I had put this on my list originally because I thought this was by an Indigenous Hawaiian author. And a couple of months ago, I'd made a comment about this on Jocelyn at Yogi with the Books video. I'll link her below. And she mentioned, oh, that's not actually an Indigenous author. And I'd looked into it and no, it's somebody who was born in Hawaii, but who's not Indigenous. Parents are from like Kansas. But still, I was planning to buddy read this, and so I thought that's okay. Still interested in reading it, and I picked it up and I got 2% into this book before I realized that I needed to stop, because while this is not written by an Indigenous Hawaiian author, the characters and the sort of magical realism, that kind of belief system, are Indigenous Hawaiian, and there's nothing in this book, at least in the beginning of it, that makes you understand that this is written from an outsider's perspective. It's written as if the author is Indigenous, and that immediately made me pause and realize like this might be one of those cases of major cultural appropriation. And so I went and I looked at it, and that is exactly the kind of feel that I think a lot of other people are getting from it too. I'm going to link an article that I found below where there was an Indigenous Hawaiian interviewer who was interviewing Kawai Strong Washburn about this book and had also assumed that he was Indigenous and had this whole interview talking to him, talking about their shared heritage, all of these sorts of things, and he never corrected her. And it sounds like he's kind of intentionally left it very ambiguous as to what his heritage is, as has the publisher, to sort of capitalize on that idea of a story about and by an Indigenous Hawaiian author, even though that's not the case. And that's just very shady. So this just was not something that I wanted to get into. I don't really feel comfortable with that, so I DNF'd it. The next book that I DNF'd was Sorrowland by River Solomon, and this was one that I was both sad to DNF, but also not surprised. So River Solomon is an amazing author. I really, really, really love their other works. I think that they're just so talented. However, I'd heard from a lot of people that while this book is amazing, it also is pretty graphic. It's got quite a bit of body horror. It's a little bit of a horror novel, in fact. And they were not wrong. So I got through 11% of this before I realized that I just had to stop. There's quite a bit of violence, quite a bit of body horror, quite a bit of animal cruelty, all of these sorts of things, and it was just too much for me. The story itself, I think, has a lot of really cool things to say, and River Solomon is always somebody who I think is worth listening to. So unless you're somebody like me who is super squeamish about these things, I still think this is a wonderful book to pick up. But if you are squeamish like me, be warned, it's quite gruesome. And lastly, I DNF'd Finna by Nino Cipri. So this is a sci-fi novella that was on the Hugo shortlist for novellas, which is why I picked it up. Not something that I was necessarily that interested in reading on my own, but I thought I'd give it a try, and it didn't work for me. So I got through about 28% of this before I decided to DNF it. And this one wasn't a DNF because I hated it. It was more a DNF because I wasn't very engaged, and there were some things that were getting on my nerves. So this is a story that is set in kind of an IKEA type big box store where it ends up that there are multiverses, and because of the unique design of the floor space in IKEA, not IKEA, Littenwald, this creates interdimensional portals, and one of the customers goes missing. The two most junior members of the staff are volunteered to go and find this person, and they happen to be exes. So this story is something where there's a lot of humor in it, and I think if the humor works for you, it's going to be a fun story. It didn't really work for me, so that wasn't going for it. The other thing about this story is that it's very much about the connection and the interactions between these two exes. And I think that there's probably a lot of interesting things that it was going to say, but for me, their relationship was very, very toxic. There was so much bickering, so much anger and meanness, and I just don't like drama and angst in my books, so that was just not for me. So this one wasn't for me, but I'm glad that I tried it, since I will have to rank things for the Hugos. Okay, so that's everything that I read and DNF'd this week. Quite a few DNFs. If you guys have read any of these, if you have any thoughts, any recommendations, anything at all, just leave me a comment down below.